Well, for me, it means being a part of a community that has historically prioritized and held space for diverse members of the community, be it low-income members of our community, or other folks that have been, that are excluded from other communities across the city, and that's been really important to me. And one of the reasons I love Parkdale. And I also, the other thing I love about Parkdale is it's a community that really shows up for one another, that stands up against all kinds of injustice, be it racism, be it the kind of runaway gentrification that we've been seeing, the abusive landlords who seek to extract as much wealth as they possibly can from our community. That's something that I really love about Parkdale. And it goes back to that runaway gentrification. There's been a real loss of low income space. And when I say low income space, I mean housing, certainly, but I also mean the services that low income people depend on. Low cost grocers, those sorts of things are really under threat in a community that is facing the kind of rapid gentrification that Parkdale is. And I think it all feeds into a larger system or process of making certainly communities and our city inaccessible to low income people. And I think that's going to be an important part of the struggle moving forward. I think that they are very dangerous, and that cities and communities will eventually completely become of the purview of the wealthy. And my family never would have had a chance to have grown up in the community that I did, because it was simply a community that was affordable and less desirable to people with more material resources. So I grew up just off Lansdowne, but a little north of Parkdale. I felt community. I went to the Parkdale Library to hang out with Rita, the librarian there. It's where I, was really inspired a love of books and reading. But also, it has inspired more so, I would say, my allegiance to low-income people, to people who have been systematically made more vulnerable to things like poverty, food insecurity, housing insecurity. Those are the folks that I grew up alongside. Those are the folks who supported me, who, as a child, and those are the folks who I feel a responsibility and allegiance to supporting and doing everything I can to push back against the injustices that continue to be bestowed upon folks in low income communities like Parkdale, the South Parkdale. So a lot of my work is anti-poverty work, is about challenging food insecurity, and I think it's really important. Maybe even taking a few steps back. In this country since 1976, folks have had a right to food. Our federal government voted on this thing that gave us all a right to food, and somehow 4.4 million, or at least 4.4 million people, don't have that right, and they are navigating food insecurity. So actually, I think so often all you need to do is go to a farmer's market to really get a sense of for whom the right to food has been extended. And it has not been extended universally, and certainly not to low-income communities, especially if they're racialized. So I think this work is really important, because not only is there those pressures that folks are facing, but also the pressures associated with how we've collectively defined issues like poverty and food insecurity as issues for charity, as things that require people with more resources to donate their leftover food, or for corporations to donate their leftover food. This is not a solution to the ways in which capitalism has allowed folks to struggle to access things like food and housing. These things are have been made commodities. So we do not have. I struggle to believe that we actually have a right to food or a right to housing in this country. What we have is a piece of paper that some politicians have gotten together and pat themselves on the back to say that we have. But I do not believe that we have a right to food or the right to housing in this country. Oh my goodness, there are so many people doing incredible work in Parkdale, whether it's Karen Carter at Band. I think about Beryl Ann at Parkdale's People Economy. I think about Mercedes and Teresa at the Parkdale's People's Economy. I think about Victor Willis at Park. There are so many folks that have just been so long committed to lending their energies to supporting, the folks that have been made to struggle the most in our communities, and doing so in a really dignified way, that is not about charity but about justice, is about organizing, is about collective and people power. I think that's been really important. Just continuing to do what we do at FoodShare and supporting folks as best we can as they navigate the emergency that is this global pandemic. But I would also add that we are also, trying to inspire folks to recognize that especially our governments and our elected leaders, that there are things that we can do and investments that we could make now that could potentially mitigate the impact of an emergency like this pandemic, because the catastrophic impacts of climate change are here, and there is no vaccine, and we cannot social distance ourselves from those impacts. So I think it's really important that we, for once and for all, make investments in addressing the inequities that have been laid bare for those that haven't had a chance to see those things. I'd like to see my neighbors that have been made to struggle the most not have to struggle the way that they do. Would love to see everybody be truly able to access safe, affordable, decent place to live, and safe, beautiful, delicious food to eat. And all of those things that I think far too many people take for granted, and far too many of us let our politicians off the hook for not using all of the resources available to them to ensure that Parkdale and communities across the city, across this country, are as vibrant and safe and secure when it comes to access to those things as they possibly could be. So, thank you so much.